So pulleys are often used to help increase range of motion. And remember, we have a pulley system with the Total Gym. So when I'm working with shoulder patients and the range of motion is the intention, you can have that person use the pulleys. So as the arm is reaching back and you're trying to increase, let's say, an overhead reach, it's the other arm, it's the opposite arm coming down that can help encourage that motion overhead. You can also use your feet to kind of add a little bit of control as well. So moving on from this exercise, I'm going to take away the pulleys and I'm going to show you a couple other flexibility exercises you can flow through. So I'm going to have Jeff cross his feet, or rather his ankle over his knee, going into a figure 4 position, and then he can just slowly enter into a squat. If it's too hard for that person to maintain the glide board, especially when you're at a higher incline level, have your patient move up the glide board so that the board closes as you slowly come all the way into a squat position. Transitioning from this figure 4 piriformis stretch to pushing the hips back, the legs straight, bring your feet down to the struts, and then you can go into a roll up and you have the person roll up to sitting. Remember, when you roll up, you might need to cue your patient to pull the board down so that they don't roll off the edge when rolling up. In this position, you can transition the feet right to the struts and you can go into a simple hip hinge, focusing on hamstring flexibility. Again, if I wanted to increase even more, I could walk the feet up the squat stand and or lower the incline level down. If the person's having trouble in this position with their hamstring stretch, I would increase the tower height. Transitioning from here, you can then move the person into an adductor stretch. I like to have the board closed to start off with. So he's going to come up to sitting, bring the glide board closed, and then he'll have his elbows on the inside of his knees and slightly hinge forward and push against the inner thigh and the inner knees to help open up that inner thigh stretch. Like if when you are doing yoga and you go into a low squat position, the further his rear end moves down the board, the more intensified the stretch becomes. So transitioning from an adductor stretch, I'll have him move more into a lunge, assisted lunge side stretch. Single thigh stretch is sometimes what we call it in Pilates. Hands can be onto the squat stand and he can lunge back. He can start with just focusing on the hip flexor. You can add an arm reach to this maneuver, alternating the arms. You can reach straight overhead, laterally, or add a rotation. If you're to add a strength kind of combo stretch maneuver, you can even have both hands reaching overhead, adding in different planes of motion. From this position, you can have the person just hold this stretch back, and then you can transition into what we call a full hamstring stretch by the split. So it's a supported split position. Then from here, the glide board can come all the way in. I'm going to bring the incline level down, and I'm going to stick with thinking about the lower extremity, and I'm going to have Jeff transition facing the tower. He'll go into a runner stretch, but the focus now is having some pelvic support. So again, he'll stand to the side edge, and then he'll go into that lunge position with the leg supported onto the glide board, and then he's going to have his hip facing the tower. If I wanted to give more assistance, perhaps I can bring the incline level up or down depending upon what you're seeing, and I can move the foot accordingly. So if I see a lot of compensation from the pelvis and I need some assistance, I'll have him bend forward and really rest the pelvis onto the glide board and get that help and that awareness. There you go. If I wanted to be absolutely cruel, I can then assist by bending the knee and really stretching out the quad. But moving from this position, we're now going to stretch out the upper body a little bit. I'm going to have him straddle, and I'm going to use the assistance of the pulleys and the weight pulling to go back into that piriformis stretch and a little bit of lat stretching. So from here, I attach the cables. A cable will go into each hand. He'll knuckle down and take a seat, and then he'll go catty corner maybe his body a little bit over to the side and cross his ankle over his knee. And then he can let himself just be pulled forward. How far back on the board determines the stretch and the pull that one can come. Sometimes you do a little bit of hinging forward and back, and on that last repetition you might really hold the stretch. To ease it some, I would put the cables into the right hand. Actually, to intensify, I put the cables into the right hand, and to ease it, I would put them into the left hand. Now moving on from this position, I'm gonna now really get into a great lat stretch. So I'm gonna have him knuckle down, stand up. I'm gonna take a hold of the cables, and you can leave the cables attached. In this circumstance, I'm just gonna disattach them, and I'm gonna have him catty corner his knees over to the side of the glide board. So in this circumstance, when he's facing the tower, he's catty-cornering them to the left side. His left arm will reach across for the right rail. And then he's gonna sit back and have a nice lat stretch. If I really wanted to intensify and get more of a pull, I can bring the lat bar down. I can have him grab a hold of the lat bar. He's gonna have to assist himself a little bit by pulling his knees in some, and then the board can slowly come down and he can intensify that stretch. So that's another way to think of your total gym outside of the strengthening, is really adding in that element of flexibility.